So now that you know how to lay out a UI for a user to interact with, I bet you're wondering, how do I actually make it do stuff? Well, that's what we're going to do right now. So, here I have not a very complex UI, it's just a single button. As you can see, it's named My Button, but it's not going to actually do anything when I run this. If we go in our code, we can see that our layout activity event is going to be loaded and displayed, but then what? Well, I'll show you. First, I'm going to take a button variable, and I'm going to add it to my activity. Now that I have a place to save a reference to an actual button object, I'm going to need to get the button that I actually have in this XML and point this particular variable to it. I can do that with a method called findViewById. Now you've been seeing this already in your setContent view, and what happens is this R object is created at runtime, and it contains all the different particular views that you might want to use. So in this case, I'm going to reference the runtime variable. I'm going to get the ID object from it, and sure enough, there is my button. Android likes to refer to all of its views as resource IDs, which are ints. But now I have a problem. Incompatible types. I'm getting a view by findViewById, and I'm trying to assign it to a button object. Well, if you remember our typecasting trick, we can fix this right away. Great. Now I have a reference to a button, but that's still not going to make it do anything when someone presses on it. The tool we're going to use to connect our button to our code is a listener object. Now, every view element in Android has the ability to set different listeners for different events. In this case, onClick is actually onTouch. Now, I could go and create a new class, implement the onClick listener interface, and fill in the code. But instead, I'm going to use the power of a new tool called Anonymous Classes to quickly create a handler on the fly. New, pressing O. I see right here there's an onClick listener. I press enter, bam, code is written for me, and I'm already on my way to do something the minute someone touches that button. Now, if you look at this more closely, it's a little strange. We have new, and then we have this interface. We have no name. Well, that's why they're called anonymous classes. This is almost like doing something kind of like this. Inline. Except, rather than doing that, we don't care about the name. It's not going to matter to us. Well, now that we have a method that will run when our button is pressed, we can put in code to actually change it. I will just change it to say something exciting and run my code. Now, remember that this is an actual class. I can't have a local variable here and refer to it in my onClick method. And sure enough, if I press it, voila, we actually have our UI reacting to our user input. So let's just finish up our discussion about this anonymous class so that you guys can do whatever you want in your onClick listeners. You have to be careful that if you create something like this, that you don't expect to be able to use it in here. If I try to do that, I'm going to get complaints. It's because it can't actually guarantee that this particular reference is going to change. Remember, this is a whole class. There are two ways to fix this. This is not the recommended way, just making your variables final. Sure, now they're immutable and you can't change them, but it's much more graceful to actually just keep them as member variables and reference them where you need them, like I did here. Now you can finally take all that Java knowledge you've been working on and all of those Android UIs you've been creating, put them together, and make some amazing apps.